You know, when I said a year ago that you should definitely read Chainsaw Man, even if the adaptation turns out to be a 12 out of 10, I didn't actually count on them getting there. Anyway, let's talk about Fujimoto's work before his claim to superstardom in the form of The Lad Whomst Goes to Vroom. Especially his one other serialized work that will probably never get an anime adaptation, for reasons both technical and, shall we say, ones that severely limit TV airtime slots it could use. I hate calling things crazy or insane just because they are non-standard, but just this once I will indulge in it. Shit's crazy, man! First, however, let's address the 8 one-shots he drew and published between 2011 and 2018, which have been collected and published in the West as Before Chainsaw Man. Kinda disrespectful if you ask me. Usually people just brush them aside saying, oh yeah, he did some one-shots before, and then talk about Look Back and Goodbye Eri, which came out much later. And while I don't intend to spend much time on them either, I think they are worth addressing as a whole, being some early attempts at absurdist humor and themes that resonate throughout later works of the author, like the influence of aesthetics on our worldview, how that can be overcome by a genuine bond between people, how lies can shape reality, making them more genuine than telling the truth. I think there are some misses that Fujimoto really needs his 200 to 300 pages to reach the full emotional impact that he is capable of, but by golly did he try and get it out there. I would say that 4 out of 8 of these short stories are good in particular. Love is Blind is a cute, absurd ride about a guy trying to confess his feelings despite everything in the world working against him. Siren Rhapsody is a love story between a human and a man-eating siren. Yogen no Nayuta is a nice story of a brother putting all his trust in a younger sister despite her being a literally demonic gremlin. And finally, Imoto no Ane is a great one-shot about a woman getting absolutely obliterated socially because her younger sister painted her nude and displayed that work in public. 50% isn't a bad score, especially considering that Fujimoto is the same age as me, so these were all made when he was 18 to 25, and I made exactly one good life decision in that time myself. And then, published between 2016 and 2018, we have Fire Punch, a manga which, while not flawless, I found more interesting than CSM in many aspects. It might honestly be one of the most interesting comics of all time on a philosophical level, and it's also a work in which a character gets directly asked if he would shoot fireballs out of his dick if he masturbated. So let's get to it, shall we? The story finds us in a world covered in an eternal winter. There are people with abilities beyond normal human capabilities, collectively known as being blessed. And one such blessed figure, known as the Ice Witch, decided to use this gift to curse the entire world instead. This has been going on for so long that any non-canned food straight up does not exist, and people drop like flies from freezing and starvation. Well, flies dropped way before we did, but you get the idea. In such a world, we find 2 children, the siblings Agni and Luna, blessed with bodily regeneration, though the boy's gift is much more active than the girl's, and they use it to help others in their village survive. That is, chop Agni's arm off a bunch of times so that everyone has food. It's not much, but it's a life they find some joy in, and being the only 2 young people in the small pond that is their entire world, they even begin to view each other romantically despite being blood-related. After all, there is a future for them even in this dying world, isn't there? And then, a huge boulder gets dropped into this minuscule pond. Soldiers of a nation known as Behelmdog arrive, trying to stock up on food and gasoline. They are a militaristic monarchy, framing themselves as those who would defeat the witch and put an end to the eternal winter, offering the people from the hamlet citizenship and safety as compensation for the help. But once they find the severed and dried human arms, their commander, Doma, orders them to leave, clearly disgusted with the whole situation. And he leaves one final parting gift in the form of his own blessing. A fire that does not die until it completely annihilates the fuel it ignited. Agni finds himself surrounded by burnt corpses and smoldering ruins, in great agony as his body burns away and regenerates back at seemingly the same pace. But soon enough, he discovers he can will the regeneration to stop, and he welcomes the idea of dying with everyone else and finding peace on the other side. And then he finds another burning body, the only other person with the power of regeneration able to withstand this long. Luna. And before she dies, she says one last thing to Agni. Live. Engulfed in flames, screaming in agony, Agni lies all alone, surrounded by the ashes of his life. It takes years before he can even stand up. Then, finally, he is able to control his body enough to form a fist. Moving forward, with only thoughts of revenge in his mind alleviating the pain, he comes across a convoy of Behendog soldiers transporting slaves for their nation. And with just a page flip, we go from their blessed soldier throwing a punch to the title drop. And that's chapter 0, everyone! So yeah, I think this introduction is great, immediately setting the manga apart. From a name like Fire Punch, I genuinely expected a superhero-esque fare, but what I got instead was a dying world and the world's least subtle allegory of suffering as the protagonist.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
But it also perfectly encapsulates why I think this manga isn't getting a TV airing anytime soon. One, while taking on darker subjects is nothing new for anime, it usually takes a bit of getting there, or it is so juvenile that it's like drawing angry eyebrows on a Furby. 2, this man is on fire. Non-stop. And he's the main character. I pray for the wrists of anyone that has to draw in between frames of this shit. Either that, or they would really need to get their 3D CG act together for this. Which is not to say that the manga is nothing but searing pain and misery. There is some incredibly dark humor to it. On his quest to deliver the most painful death possible to Doma, Agni comes across a colorful bunch of characters such as Sun, a cheerful boy saved by Agni who then begins to view the burning man as a living god. Or Togata, a movie freak who desires nothing more than to create a new film, finding Agni's tale to be the perfect material for one last video recording to be made on Earth. Screaming at people for being boring because it's the third regenerating guy in a row, can't you bitches be more varied, this footage is useless! I fucking love Togata so much, you have no idea. That said, there are some legitimate criticisms I have against Fire Punch as a work. One, in its attempts to portray a world in a death spiral, it gets edgy, and at some points, particularly in some early chapters of the manga, it feels like edge for the sake of edge itself. Like, sure, we have a fascist state treating women as incubators because we need to outbreed the cold. Okay, sure, I can buy that. But then we have a high-ranking member of said fascist state wanting to watch said enslaved girls get fucked by dogs. Eye-rolling and not serving anything, but rules for thee but not for me, sure. But then we get some rank-and-file soldiers talking about fucking prepubescent boys. And a few chapters later, a gay couple that escaped Behendog because you're dead to that society if you don't contribute to fulfilling Shinzo Abe's dream, like Fujimoto, my man. 1, I get it. 2, make up your fucking mind about how this dystopia works. Second point of contention is the art. In Chainsaw Man, it was easy to instantly recognize everyone, despite them having rather subdued designs. Here, it's much more of a problem, and several faces and hairstyles just blended together for me, and I read this twice. It even gets played for a joke once, and characters of real prominence are distinguishable enough. It sure helps that one of them is a walking bonfire, but there isn't even a chance to attach yourself to some third-rank schmuck like Kobeni in this. The third point is that, under all the flames, the premise is rather standard. A quest for revenge. We saw a ton of stories like this. Wait, what do you mean Agni finds Doma at the end of Volume 1 and he's an old man that doesn't even remember what he did? See, if the pacing in Chainsaw Man was like revving up the titular power tool, sharp tags leading to a barrage of noise and violence, then the pacing in Fire Punch is like throwing a match at a trail of gasoline. The part the match hits is lit instantly, but it's not about the fuel, it's about the flame spreading to everything around it. And before you know it, that one spark engulfs things that you didn't even know were there. On that note, the spoilers start now. There is no timestamp because there won't be anything left once the ashes settle. Get running if you don't want to stay for the family barbecue. Fire Punch is a story about the inevitability of death and the lengths we can reach to delay that constant. The death of your body, of your personality, of hope, of the notion of society, of this planet, of the universe itself. And, just as often, how the things we're trying to keep alive at all costs are built on flawed foundations. It's screaming those themes, both in text and presentation, even as it's clear that it has no solutions to offer to those problems, only frustrations. After all, in art, be that movies or manga, everything is permitted. No taboo is off the table, but even that art will inevitably degrade and disappear, the meaning of it forgotten. Nothingness unites all. Let's take it from the top down, because, unsurprisingly, the big picture tends to be a lot less nuanced than people. First, let's start with the world at large. It's not killed by a single act of a malicious person. The Ice Witch is just a myth perpetuated by Behelmdog to give itself a tangible, singular enemy to unite people against. To give some hope that driving a sword through a proverbial dragon's heart will somehow solve an issue of such a scale. Wow, it's just like Pathologic! But no, this is a naturally occurring ice age, one that will not give way to a warming, at least not before humanity just dies out. Well, humanity on the planet, we colonized the galaxy and reached heights previously thought unattainable, and Earth was just forgotten, left to die. The people on it forgetting their history in a struggle to survive the unsurvivable. Whatever amazing things we can achieve as a species, whatever wonders are to be created after Earth, we are not there to see them, and neither is anyone in this story. Though, then again, we are told that that civilization has also withered, eternally stagnating, as everyone evolved into identical, interchangeable people, with no individuality. Blonde hair, blue eyes, living eternally with no spark of creativity whatsoever. Even as the physical death of the body was defeated, something else had to die in its stead. And similarly, Surya, one of such fabricated humans able to access all of the blessings, most likely she's left behind, wishes to make a reverse of that sacrifice, pump all life out of everyone left and everyone in the stars, to give Earth a new beginning, give birth to a new humanity, all for a chance of seeing a new Star Wars movie. Man, and they say good villains need to have relatable motivations. Slight tangent, but man, for years I had a book idea rattling in my head about people escaping an underground prison facility, only to discover that the plant has been long abandoned and forgotten. Yet another proof I must find Tatsuki Fujimoto and kill him if I do not surpass him. Then, on a societal level, we have Behelmdog, a fascist nation fueling its existence by slavery, turning blessed people who are not citizens into sources of electricity and heat. Not to mention countless people worked to death or bred like cattle. Or perfectly willing to keep murderous criminals simply confined as they can be of further use, despite killing those without powers on the slightest of whims. The division is clear. Slaves and masters. Powerless and powerful. Fuel and those kept warm by it. A mountain of corpses and those who will climb it to reach a summit where warmth returned. All for the idea of humanity's survival, humanity as a species at least, at any cost. Bodies perish, but the idea of a society must persist, and organization of it is the best long-term plan to wait out this long winter. Start a fire and huddle around it, and try not to think too hard of what it is that you're burning to survive. Another tangent, but I wonder if Fujimoto was raised Catholic. I don't like speculating on the life of a man I never met, but he sure likes the iconography of that faith. Though it does not say many positive things about it either, even if it's never explicitly named. Fire Punch gives us Judah, a woman who knowingly lies about hearing the voice of a king to give her little state direction, even as she hates doing it. Not that slapping crosses on top of things for cool points or writing evil priests is uncommon, I'm a Fate fan after all, but his works in particular just give me that kind of vibes. Especially with Agni's later deal of feeding those who have faith in him with his own body. And to discuss the personal level with all the characters is to discuss the idea of aesthetics, which are just as, if not more so, important and persevering than ideals, at least when it comes to the story of Fire Punch. The main lens through which we view it is Togata and his infatuation with movies. As soon as he shows up, camera in hand, we get the theme of aesthetics influencing our perception of the story on the pages. Go on, nameless bastard soldier, rape that girl, it will make the audience hate you and cheer when I bash your head in. Stop filming, this is the second regenerating enemy, this scene is not gonna be interesting if it's a repeat. Of course I want to film the Burning Man, have you seen him? He's the perfect protagonist material. More than just laying bare the narrative ropes and pulleys of Fire Punch itself, this serves as a core thematic point. What influences and shapes us is not the truth but our perception of it, how we feel about what we take in with our senses. A cult forms around Agni not because people know this scared, wounded boy beneath the flames, but because they see an impossible figure of a burning man, killing their oppressors and feeding them with his body. Agni himself cannot bring himself to kill Judah because she looks and sounds just like Luna did. And even if he fully understands that they are separate people, he cannot shake that feeling of longing. Sun, who becomes the leader of the Agniist cult towards the end of the story, vows to kill the fake Agni, as he does not feel about the burning man standing in front of him the same way as he does about the idealized version of him in his heart. Behelm Dog's entire ideology and religion are based on a shitty action movie, because it served as an easy-to-digest, clear-cut introduction of the ideas of right and wrong, and so on and so forth. Togata knows it and despises it, because he, while being a man, can only be perceived by others as a woman due to his body. Yeah, Togata is trans, but cannot change his physical body to become his ideal self, due to it constantly regenerating to its previous state. And while this is a dire note to live on, let's put a pin on that, we'll come back to this later. Agni is, naturally, the character whose perception and aesthetics change the most, being the protagonist. From a helpless child, to a burning brick shithouse of a man with his fiery willy out, to a god of a religion, to an unforgivable villain named Fire Punch who just killed a bunch of innocents and destroyed the only functioning society on Earth, to a lost man who only wishes for his sister to be happy, to a man named Sun who does not know about his past. We see him from all perspectives, including his own, all painting a different picture. Good, bad, he's the guy on fire. And throughout the story, the fuel that keeps him alive despite his pain, either explicitly physical or spiritual, keeps changing as well. Live for revenge. Live to give the survivors faith and sustenance. Live to keep Luna safe. And finally, he just lives, not even knowing why, but feeling that he has to. But Fire Punch also lives, the unthinking demonic force of destruction that Agni is perceived as, physically the same person as him, but a separate being, both in his and pretty much everyone else's perception. Flames overtake his face, or in one case he flipping cuts it off, so that he is no longer perceived as a person. Agni has to die for Fire Punch to live. Sure, he knows it's best to leave Doma and his band of orphans alone, but it's not the truth that drives him, but feelings of loss, of anger, of the need for revenge to keep existing. So yeah, Fire Punch burns a bunch of children and an old man to death. Our protagonist, everybody! And when Agni, his flames extinguished, is asked by a survivor to kill Fire Punch, he tries to kill himself physically, but he cannot. Because while he knows that he is the very same person, he does not perceive himself as one, no matter how hard he tries to end it. And while trying to live as a normal person, he keeps up the appearances of pretending to sleep and eat with others despite not needing those things at all. To be perceived as being like the others is equated to actually being a part of that group. Speaking of Doma, he also gets a chat with Agni before turning into roast pork, and he is aware of this effect of aesthetics as well. He claims he did nothing wrong by burning his village down. Even if the cannibalism was consensual, Agni unknowingly did the unthinkable. He instilled the perception of people as something that can be used as a source of food in a dire need. If he were to disappear, these people would not just die. They would go out and hunt others to survive, and in turn instill the same idea of cannibalism in those who meet them. Agni would live on in that macabre idea. Hell, it's exemplified in Agni doing the exact same thing when trying to protect the Agniist cult, because that's the thing that makes sense to him. And Doma himself is an example for that, learning the truth about where Behelm Dog ideals come from and becoming disillusioned with the state and the work he did for it, but still strongly believing in those convictions on a personal level. After all, he does not regret burning that particular village to the ground one bit. All of this paints a certain picture. To live is to kill. And that is certainly a true sentiment, just taken to its most unpleasant extreme in this story. Aside from truisms like our need to eat organic matter, this also extends to the abstraction. To become better, you need to kill the parts of yourself you dislike. To accept yourself, you need to kill any reservations you have about yourself. For your future to live, you need to kill your past. To build a home, you need to clear land and destroy and reshape base forms of the materials you're using. You will die either way, sooner or later, but to delay that, you need to kill. But this is not a message that Fire Punch ends on. Because as long as you are remembered, even as a vague feeling, you still live. You cannot truly die as long as someone out there remembers you. The most obvious example of that is Luna. Despite physically dying in Chapter 1, she lives on in Agni's memories and drive for revenge, and in him seeing her reflection in Judah, the de facto leader of Behendok. And as the latter loses her memories, he fully succumbs to those feelings and suppresses the truth of her being a different person from both her and himself, giving us the single best panel in all of manga. Witness it. But it's because of this delusion and lies that Judah grows to return those feelings and care for him as well, ultimately becoming the tree that brings life back to Earth to protect him instead. This is probably best portrayed by the little fist bump of promise between Agni and Luna and Judah. The pain remains, reminding them of the promise, even if they forget why it was made. Even as Judah spends millennia as the tree and loses all sense of self, the feeling remains. And as literally everything else in existence dies, the two of them remain. And only when they meet again and close their eyes in unison can they truly die, get up from their seats and leave the cinema in which their entire lives were displayed. A dark spin on that is Sun, who despite his fervent zealotry for Agni, was not recognized by his idol at all as he burned him to death. He was remembered by Neneto, who lived to die of old age in the New World and named the amnesiac Agni after him. But Sun, the cheerful child she met and befriended as they were both captive, truly died with her. As I'm writing this, I realize I really shafted Neneto by not mentioning her at all so far, but unfortunately the other characters were more interesting. Sorry girl, no hard feelings, just a lack of them. On an abstract level, this is true for movies as well. Togata's stash, burned by Doma, might as well have been the last videos left on Earth, but the movies lived on in his memories, passed on to Agni and Neneto, who in turn built a movie theater in the New World. The very idea of movies lived because one person remembered those stories and held them dear to their heart. But at the very end of the universe, one more person is still alive. Togata. After all, the idea of the afterlife being a cinema came from him, and in the very final panel we see exactly that. Even as Agni lived for millennia and had his memories obliterated, the feeling remained. Even if he would not remember Togata's name or his face, the impact he had on his life stayed with him until the very end. I think it's quite significant that the three people to see the very end of the story, the death of the universe itself and a few minutes past it, are Agni and the two people he was ever truly connected with. Judah, mixed with his feelings for Luna, to whom he confined when they played a pretend family and who laid bare her feelings for him in turn. And Togata, the man he looked up to as his older sister, or brother once he learned what the manic director is struggling with. Togata fully understood what person Agni is under all the pain and flames, and Agni in turn tried to be as supportive as he could and made a genuine effort to truly understand Togata. Even as this found family burned to death when saving Agni from an attempted suicide by drowning, he still lived on. You will live as long as others remember you. So live as long as you can, no matter what it takes. And no matter how much you burn and hurt physically or spiritually, live as long as you can. I won't tell you it gets better, it's not my place to do so. You will die, sooner or later, even if that later comes billions of years from now. So there is no point in hastening that point. And when it comes, you will find yourself in a cinema, get some popcorn, sit down and watch a movie of your life. It can be funny, tragic, cringe-worthy, uplifting, or utterly demoralizing. After all, in movies, anything goes. But when you sit there, it will make sense. A complete story. and once it ends, you'll get up and leave. And hey, who knows what's past that exit? It's not part of the movie after all. I believe this is the point of Fire Punch. And as someone who came to the very same conclusion years ago and vowed to live as long as humanity itself, it's no wonder this manga resonated with me this much. Granted, starting this channel was the first actual effort I made for that goal, and I won't find out if I made it until the screening. So, I'll see you there on the day of the premiere, and hopefully many times before it as well. Actually wait, this is a horrible note to leave on. I don't want to cultivate prosocial relationships, I'm already too weird about a mangaka I never met. Cut! Hey, that's the credits of the video. Script and voice, me. Editing by Frog King and Lardo. Give the two a standing ovation, everyone, couldn't do it without them. And most important of all, my wonderful Patreon supporters now visible on the screen. I would especially like to thank the newest person to misplace their trust in me, Bassist Bill. I have an idea on what the next video will be, but I make no promises.